When we run the program itself, the data will be set into the array. Well, how do we find the information when we need it? Well, between lines 70 and 140, we've got a repeat until, which means it's a loop, and on line 80, we're going to input, and then in between the quotation marks there, we've given a prompt, enter name and date, so we enter either the name or the date, and we're going to call it a variable name query string. And it will go round and round the loop, and on line 140 until query string equals stop. In other words, when we type stop into the program, it will actually stop. Line 130 print just actually gives us an empty line to make reading it easier. Well, we're going through 10 items of data, so we have another loop here between line 90 and 120. For item equals 1 to 10, next item, it will go through the data 10 times. And these are the two instructions which carry out the logic. The first time round the loop, if name string 1 equals query string, then print date string 1. And on line 110, if we'd entered a date, if date string 1 equals query string, then print name string 1. And it will go round and round this loop for item equals 1 up to 10 times until we've read through all the data that we've actually put into it. So let's run it. There is the prompt, enter name or date. So I'm going to enter David. And I've got a birthday there, the 3rd of November. This time I'm going to enter the actual date, 3rd of November. And it's scanned through and found two names there, David and Carol. And I'm going to say stop. Well, there are two major disadvantages with the program. Let's just have a look at it again. I'm just going to list the first half dozen lines or so we can see it. Well, first of all, if we want to add more dates or names, we have to alter the program itself. We can see here, this instruction here, this loop, only allows us to read 10 items of information. So if we add to it, we'd obviously have to change that number. The information itself in this data string is embedded here within the program itself, and that would cause all sorts of problems. In fact, you'd have to be a programmer virtually to be able to change it. The second disadvantage is that the amount of data you can handle is limited by the size of memory in your machine that's left over after your program's been loaded. So normally, we simply wouldn't write the program in that way. We'd write it so that the data can be kept in files quite separate from the program itself. And we'd have to be able to store those files on disk or on tape, because otherwise we'd lose the information when the machine switched off. In BASIC, we'd have to write instructions for the machine which were rather like what we'd do with a real file. We'd take a file, and then we'd name it. We'd call the file, let's say, birth. The second action would be to open the file, and then we'd copy into the file from the memory of the computer, and so on, and store it in there. And finally, we would then close the file. So, in BASIC, the words of code you'd write would reflect those four actions. Similarly, if you wanted to get the information out of the file, you'd write code which would be like the reverse of that. You'd look for a file called birth, you'd open the file, copy the information into the computer's memory, and then close it. And once the information was in the memory, you could search through it in the way that we saw earlier. Well, if I wanted to use a database, I wouldn't want to struggle through the complexities of writing it, especially in BASIC. I'd be much more likely to buy a package to do a serious job. Now, here's an interesting problem. There are over 2 million video recorders in this country, and it's a real problem keeping track on what you've recorded, particularly if you've got a lot of cassette tapes and you want to find something quickly or find a space for a new recording. This might be the sort of thing a school might want to do where they've got a whole library of tapes. Now, we've got a small database package here loaded on this machine, and it really is quite fun to use. When you buy a package like this, it tells you exactly what you've got to do and makes life very easy for you. Here we've got a list of alternatives that we can do at this point. It's called a menu, and this is a menu-driven system. So I want to load an existing data file. I hit 1, and it says insert data file disk and press a key. So I take a new disk and load it in, and that's the one with my file on it, and hit a key. And immediately it comes up with the two data files that I've got on this disk, one of plants and the other one called videos. Well, that's the one I want, too, so I hit that one. And there it is, data file videos. It contains 83 records, and there's room for approximately 68 more. So I've got 83 recordings detailed on that file. I can add a record, delete a record, search for a record, and so on. So let's hit 3 and search for a record. I don't know what tape number it is, or the count, or the title, or the subtitle. And I'm going to use artist. What a name. And all I type in there is the question mark Mac, And what this will do is to search through the records to find where the artist, the field artist, contains the letters MAC. I don't mind about the duration or the subject or the priority, and there it is. And the first one is on tape 1, and it's strings and things making most of the micro, business club, Mac and others, computer program. My goodness, I did do a lot of recordings of myself. But there is one that isn't me, but it's obviously found the letters MAC in the name of John Mace under artist. Right, what else can I do? Let's go back to the menu once again. Well, perhaps this time I want to make a recording, say a 25-minute recording. So I want to search through my files to find space for a 25-minute recording. And that's where these greater than, less than signs come in. I'm going to search again, hit number 3 for a record. I don't know what the tape number is, the counter, the title, subtitle, artist, and it's going to search on duration. And I'm going to search for something for a space which is greater than 24 minutes and less than 30 minutes. Let's put it 30 minutes. I don't mind about the subject. The priority, since I'm going to record in this area, I want something that I don't want to keep, so I'm going to give it a low priority, say 0. And press the space bar, and it comes immediately with one with me on it, Mac and Others, Business Club. That's on tape number 1, counter 570. There's one on tape number 4, it's MASH, great program. And that's about all of 25 minutes. Well, it's obvious which one I'm going to over-record. It's hard enough remembering to write the name of a recording on a cassette itself, let alone putting it into the computer. So whether you'd actually use this program or not is another matter. You'd need to be very disciplined in the way you put the information in. You've got to remember to change the entries if you record over something. You've got to remember to set the tape counter to 0 and so on. Now, just as before, this program can only hold as much information as you can get into what's left of the computer memory after the program's loaded. This limits the size of the data file. Going back to our gramophone records, that's about enough to hold the details of 100 to 140 gramophone records, which isn't bad for a small personal collection. But suppose you wanted to keep more information. The next step would be to arrange for the program to be able to pull in information in chunks from a bigger data file. And using this technique, you'll be limited only by the size of the computer backing store, the floppy disk or a cassette. But when we start handling a lot of data and want to search through it quickly, tape is pretty useless. Not only is it slow, but it only enables us to get at the information held on it in a stream. And we can only read it sequentially, bit by bit, along its length. One advantage of a disk is that it enables you to access the information in what's known as random access. And you can get at any information by moving the read heads across like this to any of the tracks, and very rapidly you can select the information that you want to get hold of. This means we can actually break up our file so that we go very, very quickly to any part of it we'd like. Let me show you the difference.